I want to ask you something. I want you to sit with it before you answer. Have you ever had the feeling in a quiet moment that there is more going on than the eye can see? Just past the edge of what's provable. Just outside the comfortable boundary of the visible world. Something is in motion, a pull, a push, a larger story you are somehow a small character in. I've had that feeling my entire life, and I've been sensitive since I was a kid. I've stood in rooms where the air went thick for no reason that I could name. And I've walked away from situations I could not explain, knowing when the explanation was real, even if I could not give it to anyone else. I know I'm not alone in that. I know that somebody listening just felt their chest tighten because they've had the feeling too. They never knew where to put it. Today's guest spent 35 years of his life doing one of the most extraordinary jobs a human being can hold. He flew fighter aircraft. He watched the skies on behalf of the entire continent. He spent decades trained to see threats that most of us would never think about in places most of us never have to look. Then he sat down and he wrote 5,000 pages. 5,000 pages about an even larger unseen war. Faith, family, and the shape of good, the shape of evil. The battle that he believes is happening just past the edge of what we can see. And the news, the genuinely radical news in his work, what you and I are not bystanders to, that we are equipped for, that we already have what we need. You do not need to share his fate to feel the idea land. You just have to be willing to sit in the dark with it for a minute. So sit with me in the dark for a minute, and let's meet the man who flew through the visible skies and mapped the visible ones. This is Spirit Talk Show, Bedtime Stories for Grown-Ups. I'm Doyle. Tonight's guest is Terrence Rotering. Terrence is a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. He served 30 years in the United States Air Force as a weapons systems officer on a fighter aircraft. Deployed all over the world, he spent another 15 years at North America Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, the command responsible for watching the skies over North America. 35 years of service, 35 years of looking, listening, and waiting for what most of us are lucky enough to never think about. Then he retired, sort of, because what he did next is not retirement by any honest definition of the word. He sat down and in 2 years wrote 5,000-page epic, 11 books, a series called the Chronicles of Trinith, described as a trilogy of trilogies plus two, that braids together fantasy, science fiction, spiritual warfare in a single unified saga. The capstone, the Tesseract Vortex, is on its way, with more books still being written. The story keeps growing. What he builds sits in a particular rare lineage. He is being compared to Tolkien for foundational mythos, to Lewis for moral imagination, for Peretti and Decker for spiritual warfare, for Asimov and Herbert for sentient artificial intelligence and the grand-scale science fiction, and to Jordan, Martin, and King for the sheer epic scope of it. That is heavy company. Whatever else you make of an undertaking like this, you have to respect the man who shows up at the page that long, that consistently, with that much to say. But there's a thing that makes Terrence's work a little different from anyone he's compared to. He calls it unfencing the fiction. He does not believe the spiritual war he is writing about stays politely inside the covers of his book. He believes it walks out in the living world and finds you. And this is the warm beating heart of it all. That you are equipped, that you have what you need. That in his words, unlike Frodo, you don't have a ring. Unlike Harry, you don't have a wand, but you have the stones. I love that line. I love a man who comes to the microphone with such a heart, that much faith, and a willingness to talk about honesty, and a willingness to talk about both honestly. Terrence, welcome to Spirit Talk Show. Terrence, thank you so much for coming on. Wow, I usually don't have so many. Maybe I shouldn't talk about the technical issues we have, because then I'll edit that out and people would have never known. But
we got that out of the way already, and so now it's over. It's great.
Well, thank you so much. I'm looking at I was reading your history. We did all our research, and you really had you went two very different paths. You did like 25 years, right? In
35 years.
35 years?
35? Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually more than that. So they typically in the Air Force, are we recording? Just so you know.
Oh, yeah. So what I typically do, I record from the second we come on because I can get banter at the beginning. Yeah.
Super.
Yeah.
So I should have actually sang some Song of Silence there, Sounds of Silence with, Simon and Garfunkel.
Well,
okay.
I mean, we're probably going to edit out a chunk of the technical stuff at the beginning that people don't need to hear. But they're hearing this, so they'll know what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So 4 years at the Academy, Air Force Academy, 20 years in the Air Force, and then 15 years at NORAD Northcom. So it all adds up to almost, basically 39 years Air Force total.
So, and then after that, the uniform comes off and you sit down and you write a book. So what happened to you inside that window of retirement and book?
So there was a little bit of thinking ahead there. When I was 2005-ish, I wrote a very small story for my boys. And then just to show them that they could, the books they were reading as little children, 8 and 10 years old, that they could actually have a voice in the world. So I wrote that. And then 2010, I expanded on that just as a prequel, just for fun. They were still around. So I made it, big time longer, 500 pages or so. And then nothing happened with it until 2024. And that's when I rewrote those because I got serious. And I said, I'm going to finish this and make it a trilogy. And so I added a third one to it and made my first trilogy. And I thought I was done at that point. And so I remember thinking a long time ago when I first did those first two books, well, maybe someday when I'm old and, I can't run around anymore, I'll want to do something else. So maybe it'll be, writing books. And so that's actually what ended up happening.
Wow. So, I'm looking at it says 5,000 pages in 2 years. That's not a hobby, Terrence. That's a calling, right? So when do you think it crossed from that hobby to an actual calling? Because I see your books behind you too.
Yeah, so it gets a little bit into those God winks that I don't know if you heard of those, but I've got a series of what I call God winks. And the first one is, so when I was finishing that third book, or doing that third book to make a trilogy, Forever, because I had the Faithful Stand and I was doing Forever, and I needed a place that I had written into the story a lot about, but I didn't have a name for it. And I had an island on the map, but I didn't have a name for it. So I said, and trust me, this is worth waiting the minute for. I always get the hair on the back of my neck always stands up when I tell this story. So I said, okay, I don't know what to name this. And I just got a wild hair. And I said, okay, I'll take the first letter of the different places that I put into the books in 2005 and 2010. And then the place that I added here for this last book in 2024, the first letter of those, and they were just names I'd pulled out, crazy names like Trinian, Omentia, Parlantis, Heath. I'd flown at Lake and Heath. So I picked Heath. And then El Tigra for this last book of that trilogy. And I said, hey, that actually has the vowels and stuff in the right place. Tophet. And I said, Tophet. Oh, that sounds kind of cool. I'll name that. So I put it on my island and I waited a few days and then I had another thought. I was like, I wonder if that's actually a place. So the place I had written about that everything started, and it's a little bit dark here because this was back in the fantasy time of the story, where people were sacrificing their kids over a fire to a demon. And so I said, okay, that was a kind of a cool name for that place. I looked it up, and Google comes back to me and it says it's a place in ancient Hinnom in the valley, or a place in ancient Israel in the valley of Hinnom, where the early Israelites, a sect of them, were sacrificing their children over a fire to a demon called Molech. And I was like, okay. So first of all, Doyle, here's the deal. So I wrote one story and pulled two names of places. I wrote a second one 5 years later just to make it more fun for my kids, 2 more places. And then I waited 15 more years, and then I wrote this third one. I never even planned on doing a trilogy and pulled out another place, El Tigra, E-T. And then I picked the letters of those places in the order they were introduced over those years. There's no way I could have planned that. There's no way, even subconsciously, I'm like, what the heck? So that blew me away. And so that was what I called my first God wink. And I said, maybe there's more to this. And I'm not like, hey, God's inspiring me to write these movies or anything like that. But something's going on. And so that kind of got me fired up, and I went from there.
And that became your first. I'm thinking about the stories you used to tell my son about Suki the Superdog are nothing compared to more children book stories. It seems like you've produced epics. And how your sons are grown now, I presume. They're off writing books of their own.
They're in their 30s now, yeah.
30s, wow. I mean, I have a 19-year-old son. That's my oldest, and he just left the house last year, and I'm going through that early struggle. But I've also got a 14-year-old, so they're not all gone.
Yeah.
So people are going to be interested in your working for NORAD, other than watching for Santa Claus on Christmas Eve.
Right. That was always a fun thing. Yep.
So you're spending every minute. Our lights are going on and off. So we're in this old building that's supposed to be haunted, and the light's acting weird tonight.
It's the spirit talking there.
Spirit talk. Yeah, we're getting some spirit talk here. The puns. Okay. So you watch NORAD in your job in NORAD. You're watching every day, vigilantly every day. So what does that do to a person having to sustain that level of vigilance?
Yeah. So there was actually, me personally, there was more vigilance in the early 20 years of flying the 111 and the Strike Eagle kind of thing, because you were more hands-on. It was more operational. At the NORAD level, at that command level, NORAD and NORTHCOM, so Northern Command, we were split up more into, it's more of a government service job. So you're dealing more with the money aspect and the different programs, and you're not just watching through a radar for the Soviets or the Russians that come across the border kind of thing. So it all goes together. So a little bit of I lost a little bit of my operational status at that point. So I was more of a cog in the big wheel as opposed to the tip of the spear that I had done the previous 20 years. So you lose a little bit of that day to day, I'm really doing something important kind of thing, because it's more of a staff job instead of, you're at the handle of the spear instead of the tip of the spear. So I worked programs, I worked, drug cartels, what are they doing in the different cities coming across the border kind of thing, different programs that we would be making operationalized for the next few years kind of thing that the guys out on the tip of the spear would be using. So, that was a little bit of a letdown in a way. And so it was easier to retire. But living that life from the academy, duty, mission, discipline kind of thing, then into the Air Force and flying the jets, and every moment, unlike Top Gun, you're working your butt off. It's not just having a good time up there, because everything's really important that you're doing. And then going to the staff jobs and then to NORAD, NORTHCOM, it was kind of time to retire. But at the same time, when I got out of there, when I went into retirement, I started missing what I was doing and missing having a mission and that duty aspect and purpose. And I think that's, getting back to your first question, kind of what led me into, well, what else do I want to do? And that led into these books and this book series that we're about to talk about more of, I think, than just that first trilogy, and having a purpose in writing the books, unlike just, supplying everybody with a sugar rush of, entertainment. I actually have a purpose in the books and what I'm writing.
So you have a trilogy of trilogies plus 2. So you have 11 books, and there's another one coming, I believe. So can you walk us through, one of your books is the Chronicles of Trinith, what it actually is, and for the listener who's not picked it up, what makes it different from the other books, or it's obviously it's
sure
continuing.
Yeah, so there was quite an evolution, Doyle. Like I kind of talked about, that first trilogy was more for entertaining my family and then just finishing the trilogy. Sorry about that. Someone decided to, ping me on my computer.
Yeah, okay.
Here. So, So we're just having all kinds of fun, aren't we? Yeah. The spirit is talking big time, so hopefully it'll come out of my mouth here in a second. That first trilogy was, I'm done with that. Okay, great. And about a week later, it was, wow, I think we need to do a prequel to that, because I introduced a bunch of stuff in that land of fantasy primarily that I needed to answer, because that's another part of my books, is I don't like to leave things hanging like, hey, I got some magic stones, and you just have to accept that they're magic and go from there. No. When it started delving into science fiction, which was at the end of the first trilogy, I realized that, hey, I'm going to use all kinds of stuff now. Like today's science fiction is tomorrow's facts, right? Mm-hmm. So I started using all kinds of things in that third book forever, and then I needed to fix that. So I did a prequel that leads up to the beginning of the first trilogy with the second trilogy. So you had 6 books, and that's in that land of Trinian. And then a week later, after with more Godwinks, when that was done, I was like, shoot, this isn't just one place called Trinian. There's actually 7 different places, 7 different wheels, if you will, planets dimensions that are all part of this story, and that expanded then into the Chronicles of the Seven Wheels, which was the third trilogy, and that exploded the whole series up into 7 different places, like those first 6 books of Trinian. Then, with the book I just sent in last week to the publisher, it's one book, but it's basically 4 books within it, so it's 900 pages long. So instead of doing individual books, I put them all in one book. So I look at it as another trilogy instead of just the first expansion pack. And it takes all of that, the multi-dimension of all of those different places, and brings it back down to Earth, and it does what I call unfencing the fiction. It makes it specific and important for Doyle, for Terry, and for everybody else that's listening. And I go through almost the entire history of planet Earth and the things that have been going on, and incorporate all of that into this entire story. And it becomes, unfenced to us here and important to us. And then there's another one that I've already started working on that will be released hopefully by Christmas. And that expands it yet one more time. So all of a sudden we're getting each expansion pack, as you look back on the earlier parts, blows it up to where people have read the first trilogy, the second trilogy, the third. And now they're finding out so much more stuff that they have to actually, if they were doing it right, and I highly recommend going back and reading them again, because so much has changed that they didn't really even know what the story was at that point. So I hope that kind of touched on what you were asking there. It's very complicated, obviously, when you've got, a trilogy of trilogies, another expansion pack, and then another one on the way, 5,000 or 10,000 years and 5,000 pages. There's lots to go through.
So writing right now is your full-time profession. That's what you're doing full-time right now.
Yeah, it's not as, things have changed, right? So you don't have to sit down at the keyboard and just stare at the, oh gosh, which I want. So now I can walk the dogs, be talking on the phone, having the discussions between the characters on the phone, seeing where they're going. I find that little bit of physical activity, walking, driving, doing something else, actually takes the attention away from your brain a little bit, where, your whatever part of your brain that's focused on that is the same part, I think, that's staring at the computer going, oh my gosh, I'm running out of time, I got to write more. And suddenly your mind is open to just get ideas and have characters talking to each other and have them lead you where they want to lead you. So I found that that's really the secret now with modern technology. I talk on my phone, I put most of it in there, then I drop it on the computer and fix it. And I basically don't spend more than a day on a chapter kind of thing. And then at the end of 3 months, I've got, 100 chapters, a humongous story, and I can go back and then I start editing and looking at it. And it's fun because I haven't looked at some of these chapters for weeks. And I'm like, wow, I wrote that. That's what's going on, and it's really exciting. So modern technology has really helped.
So when you say you're having conversations with the characters, you're not saying you're doing some kind of AI. You mean you're actually just having both sides of the conversation, recording it.
Right, exactly. No, AI, is out. I mean, I use AI. I found this Gemini program like a month ago where I could actually take all of my books. It was one of the few things we had out there that you could take all of your books for like $20 and you could drop them into what's called a gem. And then you could ask it questions like, hey, tell me all the battles, tell me the characters. Because obviously when you get 11 books and 5,000 pages, you're like, well, what the heck did I, and I don't want to really go back and try to find that in the book, so that the AI can find it fast. No writing at all whatsoever. The only thing I, use technology for is, spelling and grammar correction, which is your basic word kind of thing, going back and looking at, but no AI writing for sure.
So, but you've built you've wrote about AI because you've built this multiverse with a sentient AI in it, right? And as a man who comes from the world of Weapon and NORAD, what do you think we're not asking ourselves about AI yet that we should be asking ourselves?
I think it's really pretty obvious to me. Everybody I talk to, not everyone, but, my kids and other people and stuff, they're like, oh, yeah, everybody's making too big of a deal out of AI, because it only can do, what you programmed it to do. And it's like, have you been hearing the same things that I've been hearing? Because, AI is talking to each other and they don't know what they're saying and they're coming up with their own language. And, I think, the sentient AI thing I have primarily as the bad guy in the fictional books towards the end. I'm not sure it's going to become sentient, but I'm not sure we're going to know the difference between sentient and just so far advanced it is able to compute and to come up with answers and such, and to really have unintended consequences when we use it. to really, I don't know that there's really going to be a difference between it's sentient and evil, or it's just messing up big time and it's in control of so much stuff, because all the countries and everybody, all the businesses, they're all competing, the corporations, to have the best one so they can make money, or so they can, dominate other countries and such. So they're going to be letting it go, if you will, letting it loose. And I'm not sure we know exactly where it's going to go.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I work with it a lot, and I think that my feeling is I don't feel doom and gloom, but I think definitely it's going to have unforeseen things that we hadn't planned for. And maybe some people are planning for them that we don't know. So, but let's go back to your work. I was reading somewhere where what does it actually mean when you say to the reader, the battle is real and it is yours and you are equipped?
Yeah, so, and that's part of what's evolved through this series, if you will, that getting big and then coming back down to the reader and the unfencing of the fiction. So this whole story, even in the beginning, one of the main arcs and the main themes is, good versus evil. So, I go with, well, who's the ultimate, and one of the freedoms that I have in using all three of the genres and using 10,000 years and using multiple dimensions is I can go anywhere and do anything. So the ultimate big guy on both sides of the chessboard, the kings are God and Satan, basically. And then those are the dudes behind the battles. And then the chessboard is filled with the bishops and the rooks and the knights of all of the other major characters, and then down to the pawns of the people that we're really looking at for the specific characters and how they, deal with love and, anger and envy and jealousy and all of those things. So the battle is what really is going on behind the scenes here in our lives between good and evil. And however you want to look at that, is that God and Satan? Is that just human nature, good guys and bad guys? And then how we deal with it and how we look at all these characters in the books and what we can learn from them and how we can learn from them to deal with all the problems that, just like them, we're facing. So, unlike Harry Potter, who had, the wand, and unlike Frodo, who's got the ring and all those things, you have, and I don't want to give away too much here, but through the course of this series, the things like those things and that the characters have to fight the battle, you will find out you also have when this fiction is unfenced in this last volume, or the last one that I just sent in.
Like that word, that thing that I think I know what you're talking about, that's not something that's out in the world that people don't know yet. That's why you're not saying it. You think that's giving away too much if we say that word?
Okay, well, actually, I'll tell you the answer, and I'll blend it in with one of the other Godwinks. So one of the other Godwinks that I have is, a couple of years ago, I'm a big Christian guy, Doyle. So I have two big scriptures in the works. John 3:16, God loved us so much, he sent his son to save us. And then Job 19:25 through 27, I know my Redeemer lives, and in the end, I'll stand upon the earth and I'll see him. Oh, how I'm so excited for this. I'm waiting for this. So the reasons I bring that up is a couple of years ago, I'd wake up from the Air Force times and I couldn't sleep. I can't sleep for more than, 4 to 5 hours. I get up at 1 o'clock every morning. So, if I'm talking too slow or losing my train of thought here, it's because I've been up for a long time. But I'm used to it. Anyway, so John 3:16. So I wake up in the morning, I take a picture of my clock at 3:16, and I put John in front of it and just post it on Facebook. I did that for like 2 years. Then I published the first book and the second book, and they come out and they have, the second book has 316 pages, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And then I had this piece of gold that I had to use to finance my first self-published and second and third self-published books. And the day that I called them in, I said, how much you can give me for this ounce of gold? And the guy was like, well, it's changing all the time, but right now I'll give you $2,316. And I was like, okay, that's odd. And the first person on Goodreads that does a review of my book, it's her 316th review. And I'm like, okay, this is really getting kind of strange. So it goes on and on and on, but I'll leave it there for now and just get to the main point here. So this last one that I just sent in, I had the whole book written, but the main character was going to be my second granddaughter because I had put my first granddaughter into the series earlier. And then we had a second granddaughter come, and I'm like, well, I can't just leave her out because someday she's going to be like, Grandpa, how come I'm not in the books? So I was waiting for her name, and we were waiting for her birth. Well, guess when she was born? March 16th, 3/16. Yeah, so I was like kind of blown away by that because that wasn't planned. Obviously, I kind of knew, coming up on it that it was going to be close kind of thing, but still blew me away. And then they said, her name, which I'm not going to tell you immediately, but this whole next book was about the fruits of the Spirit. Okay, so there's stones in these books, and each one of these colored stones is a different fruit of the Spirit kind of deal. And it's really big in the books, and you got to read the books to find out exactly what it all means. But anyways, fruit of the Spirit. So then they tell me her name, and it's, her middle name is Thea, and I'm going, where do you come up with a name like that? I mean, what does that name mean? So I look it up, and it means gift of God, or gifts of the Spirit. And I'm like, okay, so that blew me away, because they had no idea. They hadn't read the books. They haven't read the books yet. They had no idea what I had written in this book or what it was about. And then her middle name is a perfect name for a character for these books. So that's kind of where we're going with, and it's so much bigger than that, Doyle. But if someone just hears that to go, hey, but yeah. I
mean, in doing this show the last few months, and by the way, I don't know if I told you from the beginning, Howie is in the studio with me right here.
Hi, Howie.
You have Howie here with me, but
Howie the hand.
We've been having some powerful connections with Christian people. I did a podcast today with a Christian person. I wouldn't describe myself as Christian. I was following the faith for a while. But that's not what we're talking about. But there's, I have some really amazing experiences with people who obviously have a great connection with God, and so there's something stirring in my life that just keeps throwing people like yourself and these other people I've spoken to in my path to speak to, that gives me that knot in the top of my heart. But I want to ask you about, you're talking about God and your faith in your book.
Yeah.
So was there a moment in writing the saga that you felt like you got to something that was larger, like something was steering you? It wasn't just about your pen. Was there a moment you said, wait, there's something more than just a fun story for my boys here?
Yeah, so I wanted to put, and even in the first trilogy, there's God stuff in there. Because like I kind of alluded to early, I'm giving people something to eat, basically, when I'm writing these books. And entertainment is wonderful, but there's a lot of entertainment out there, right? So I wanted to also have a purpose in doing it, and I wanted to share what I believe is true. As you get older, and you guys still have a ways to go, but when you're 63 and then you go, hey, I got to do something, or write some books, having purpose behind what you're writing is kind of the key to the whole thing, right? That's what's just keeping me going here, and keeping the story evolving. So these God winks, these 316 things are just kind of huge. And, I guess they're motivating me, inspiring me to keep going with this, because I'm kind of getting the signal, and I don't know if it's true or not. Maybe it's just I'm being inspired just for my sake, just to write these things. Mm-hmm. But between that, the 316s, the Tophet, there's a Ketuvim thing in there. There's all kinds of things that just keep building to say that I'm already connected to reality in this fictional series in what I'm doing. So between that and wanting to have that purpose and to share what I believe is true in that word, that's kind of what's kept this all going. And I don't know if it's really a moment. It's been a series of moments that just continue on through the things that I've told you and other things. And so that's why the series to me is really different than a lot of stuff that's out there, because when you get done with the Harry Potters, and I'm not kind of trying to diss it, but entertainment's great. The spiritual aspect in the book, some might say, oh, you got to stay stovepipe, you got to stay science fiction, you got to stay fantasy or spiritual warfare. And if you're putting spiritual stuff in there, that's way out of bounds kind of thing. Well, guess what? When you do, the Game of Thrones, or you do, the Wheel of Time, or any of those, you've got Eastern mysticism in there. You've got agnosticism. God is bad. God is dead. Humanism. All of these different things that you're teaching people those are basically your spiritual aspect. I'm just coming out and saying, you know what? This is going to be different. This is a Christian spiritual aspect. And unlike a lot of your stuff, when you're all done, the reader's going to walk away encouraged. They're going to know they're special. They're unique. There is order in the world versus chaos. They are important, they are loved, and there's help and answers out there. So I think it's different in that way, because when people walk away, it's not dead for them. It's going to be real, and it's going to be something they can still use in their life. And hopefully they'll refer back to characters that they've seen, as opposed to, that was a great time, and now it's done. And yeah.
Is your stuff described as Christian fiction, or is that just something you're Christian that writes fiction? Like, is it in the regular fiction fantasy section of the bookstore?
Yeah, usually they're just described as a mixture of sci-fi and fantasy kind of deal. They don't even throw the Christian part in there for the Christian fiction. even though on the back of the books, I allude to in the author description that it's a lot like the Perettis and the Deckers and the C.S. Lewis's, but also the Asimovs, because the science fiction aspect, you can have a 14-year-old, and I would recommend 14 and up just for the darkness of evil. There's no bad, sexual stuff in there, and there's no bad language, but evil does some evil things sometimes and pretty dark. So for that reason, 14 and up, unless someone's going to read to them. But, the 14-year-old can really enjoy it for the fantasy. I like dragons. I like guys flying dragons. This guy must have been in the Air Force. He's flying dragons. He's flying ships. He's flying, aircraft throughout this whole series, different times. But it can also be for the nuclear physicists, because they'll go, well, let's see, how is he talking about time dilation and a tesseract? The whole black hole and how that's affecting time and time travel through tunnels. Is there a grandfather paradox? I mean, it's really deep and heavy in areas for that guy too. So, people that are looking for the spiritual will find it in there, but it's not going to be so overwhelming that they won't enjoy the fantasy and science fiction. And hopefully these folks that are in these camps that are like, I hate science fiction, I'm a big fantasy person, and vice versa, they'll be able to enjoy the books to go, oh, that's how he blended it. That actually works. That's kind of odd, but yeah, it's good. That's
great. That's going back to your, I think there's a lot of crossover between sci-fi fans and fantasy fans, and there's people very definite in definite camp, sci-fi camp and fantasy camp. But going back to your faith for a second, I did get a clue that you were like Christian from your website, because you on the front you have a Bible verse on there, which is, now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. So can you tell me about that line and what it means and in the context of your work?
Sure. So, obviously faith wouldn't be faith if it was something that was an absolute you could point somebody to and go, I got the answer and here it is. See? It is a certainty for those who have faith that what they have their faith in is true. So I know I can't prove it to you by pointing you to something right here. It would be an argument with you, Doyle, to say, Christianity is the answer versus Buddha versus Hinduism versus Islam. Mm-hmm. I would say, who else has had, a guy that said, I am the answer, I am the Son of God, and then rise from the dead and have tons of witnesses. I don't even think there's anybody else that's even claimed to do that. Who else would have the 12 disciples all go to their death in really bad ways when they were all, really afraid when Jesus was crucified, and go to their deaths proclaiming, no, we're not making this up. This stuff really happened. This is true. And on and on and on. So I could make that argument, but you could just go, I just decide, not you, but anybody could. I decide not to believe that. But me personally, my belief in that is so absolute that that's what makes that hope sure. So that is, being sure of what we hope for. That's that. It's absolutely going to happen. I know I'm going to go to heaven someday. There is another place. And it was funny because C.S. Lewis, I just found this quote today, but it said near the end of his life, he actually said, every day to some degree, we're helping those around us to one eternal destination or the other. So we can argue on, if those are really real or if, what they are. But one way or another, we're all going to find out at some point. And so all of my series is just, it can be boiled down to good versus evil and which side do you want to be on. Just to expound just for a second on that. So way in the beginning of this thing, Satan is a dragon. He's like bitter. He's like angry. He's like, I messed up and God threw me out of heaven. And he won't forgive me, but he's going to forgive all these other people, because of what his son did, and I'm going to destroy that creation. Now, I hate them. And so the whole thing is, in all these different times and all these different places, is him trying to destroy and take the creation, that pinnacle of God's creation, away from him. And then God on the other side is, guess what? It's not really a fair fight because you're a created being too. And, I am not even a being. I am those things that you humans refer to as love and peace and joy and truth. We can't even put our arms around that concept. But so I'm on the other side, and my angels versus your demons, and all that stuff acts within the science fiction and the fantasy and all of that, and it's all mixed up, and it's just I think a great story of good versus evil.
So have you ever heard of? Because I'm not trying to challenge what you're saying at all, but have you heard of apologetics? The people who do studies in apologetics. And the reason I'm saying is because You said that, I think something I struggled with my faith, and I would call myself a person that believes in intelligent design, right? I definitely believe in intelligent design. That's because I believe there's mathematical formulas and concepts that prove that there's certain things that were made irreversibly complex, right? Certain things were, they have to have been created, right? I'm not sure I'm on the Jesus Christ Nazareth train completely, but definitely a person of faith. And you said that, but is it important that they can't point to something for it to be faith? Is that what you're saying? Like, there's no one thing you can point to. You're not being faithful if I'm giving you proof, if I have to give you proof.
Oh, no, because even, I mean, you could still deny, there's, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, I think, is one of those big books or series, and I forget who the author is, but a lot of apologetics in that, or even, where scientists will say, if the odds against for something are 1 or against something are 1 to 10 to the 42nd or something like that, it's impossible. So it got to that with evolution, just straight evolution. And so they basically said, well, life must have come from somewhere else on the planet because it would have taken too long and our planet isn't old enough. So they keep, and really it kind of makes sense, because if you don't have a faith in intelligent design and you're looking at it purely from just a scientific point of view, you have to come up with an answer like evolution, because what else do you have? I mean, if you can't have the supernatural, you have to have just the natural, then you're not going to come up with an answer that is a God or, intelligent design. But, no, I'm not saying that you can't have proof. I would throw all kinds of what I consider proof at the person that wouldn't believe. But they would still, I think, choose, if they were hard over that they were not going to believe, they would find an answer for just, well, I don't believe that. And I hear that a lot, not just in spiritual matters, but just in everything, politics, whatever. You talk to people and you say, well, this is what I've heard. This is what the news said. Or, oh, I don't believe that. So people will just dismiss. I think if, the spiritual aspect, for lack of a better word, if the dark side still has a hold on them, they will find a way to just dismiss what you're saying as any kind of what you would say would maybe be proof, or a bunch of proofs, things that would make it more likely that this is true than not true, and they just dismiss it. So, no, I'm not saying you can't have proof for it. I would just say some people would deny what that proof is.
And you're saying that, I heard you use like evolution, and you talked about, you don't think there's room in Genesis for evolution? You think it's specifically, I mean, I know we're going off a train track in a different direction.
No, that's why this is great. No, I don't mind at all. No, I think, personally, I think that God is so big. If you're going to accept that there is a God in intelligent design, a God that could create everything that we see out there, I think he could do it in what we think is 6 days. I think that's kind of putting handcuffs on him or limiting him. But at the same time, I don't think that's something that's going to be, I think it's important maybe to God what the truth is, but I don't think it's what God has said is going to be the most important thing about where you're going to spend your eternity. I think that's another thing, one of many things that we can argue about. I think there would be room probably for, each day to be 1,000,000 years, depending on how, what the original Hebrew word was and what it meant. And also I choose just to believe God is big.
Yeah, it's like the concept of a day being 24 hours. But Genesis 2 does say that God made the oceans teem with life. The word teem to me sounds like there was no movement and it developed to lots of movement. As one could suggest that development was what we would call evolution, right? If something's still, then it teems, it developed into motion, right? So I think there's space for, I think when I was chasing faith more, apologetic was important, because I believe there's a math formula that proves the existence of a creator. There's other science, and it helps me to have a math formula in my head that makes it really irrefutable, because math is perfect and it can't be, it's perfect and it's music, and it's the closest thing to God-like creation that we have is math. And so if that proves that there's a God, then it's irrefutable after that, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. I often think of us as ants, kind of, us thinking of, God or trying to really understand him, are kind of like ants trying to understand humans and putting people on the moon,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we have to be able to understand him for it to be true. I know that's what we as humans really like to do or like to believe. But like you said, mathematics, there's so much that's so perfect, if you will, that for it to just randomly come together is an impossibility in my mind. So
I think what causes damage, though, is the people who are those people in the churches who want to tell people who don't believe the 6-day idea or the flood is a literal description. They visit the people with a lot of anger and accusation and threats and where you're going and stuff. And that thing, I think it's so counterproductive. It sounds like the mill wheel. Better to put a mill wheel around your neck than to be a hateful Christian, you know? And that's a lot of people experience Christians that way, unfortunately, in our country.
If I could say one other thing real quick on that, Doyle, just remember there's also the thought of an old earth kind of thing. So there's lots of stuff in Genesis too with trees and, the solar system. And so if he speaks these things into existence, he speaks a tree, then that tree wasn't all just a seed on day whatever, unless you have to accept that a day is a lot longer than one day. If he does speak those things into age, to begin that age, then he can also have had, you don't need time for those things to develop. So that's just another thought on that. And then on the Christian aspect of people in churches, just remember also that no matter what we're talking about, whether it be politics, which we're not going to get into, but politics or anything else, the whole don't shoot the messenger kind of thing.
Yeah.
What the messenger is saying isn't necessarily true or untrue based on how they're presenting it. So Christians will have, just like any other people, because we're all flawed humans, that's why we do need a savior, they will have problems. Some people will have problems in the way they interact with other people and the way they do and say things. Absolutely. And so the grace has to be given not only for the person who is coming into the church, but also for the people that are there to realize they are also flawed people. That's why they're in church. So, but I totally get what you're saying.
It is an area but I'm sorry, we're focusing more back on you because this is about honoring you and something we do in our show. I don't know if you listen to any of our shows, and we do this thing. We researched your books, we researched you, we looked up about you, and we wrote a tribute story to you, right? And it's about a page long, and if you'll indulge us for the next, the sultry voice of Howie, I have to call it the sultry voice because his fans demand it. I call it the sultry voice of Howie, and he's going to read this tribute story to you if you'll indulge us for a few seconds. And here is Howie.
Thank you.
There is a particular kind of man There is a particular kind of man you do not meet very often anymore. He shows up early. He keeps his word. He does the hard, unglamorous work nobody is watching, and he does it the same way for 35 years because the work matters more than whether anyone is paying attention. That is Terrence. For most of his life, he was paid to watch, to look for what the rest of us are lucky enough never to have to look for. He flew in fighter aircraft. He stood at the consoles of NORAD. He spent decades training his eyes for the kind of threat that, when it comes, does not give a person time to prepare. That kind of vigilance shapes you. It makes you steady in a way most people never have to become. And it makes you a believer. I think in the seriousness of unseen things, because Terrence spent a career dealing with realities that the average person never had to acknowledge were on the radar at all. Then he took the uniform off, and he did something almost no one I have ever met has done. He sat down, and he worked. 5,000 pages in 2 years, 11 books, a multiverse, a trilogy of trilogies plus 2, with more still being written. That is not retirement. That is not a hobby. That is a man who heard a calling and answered it with the same discipline he gave to flying fighters, the same vigilance, the same refusal to leave the post before the post is done. But what really gets me about Terrence is not the scope of the work. It is what is inside the work. He is writing about the same unseen war he spent his career half suspecting was always running underneath the visible one. He calls it spiritual warfare. He writes it without apology. And the radical thing, the thing I keep coming back to, is what he says to the reader at the end of it. He says, You are equipped. You are not a bystander. You are not powerless. Unlike Frodo, you don't have a ring. Unlike Harry, you don't have a wand. But you have the stones. That is a gift. That is the line I will keep with me from this episode, because so much of what passes for storytelling these days makes the reader smaller, makes them feel like the only people who get to fight the big battles are the ones with magic on their side. Terrence refuses that. He hands the reader their courage back. He says you already have everything you need. He calls us jars of clay, easily shattered on the outside, unshatterable on the inside. And whether or not you share his faith, and I do not in the form he holds it, that image is doing real, beautiful work. It is the same news every honest spiritual tradition has been trying to tell us for as long as humans have been telling each other stories. You are more than what can be broken. What is inside you does not shatter. You are already equipped for the fight you did not know you were in. That is the man behind the books. And that, I think, is the bedtime story for grown-ups we all needed.
Well, that was really beautiful, and I really thank you guys for that. I appreciate it. And yeah, kind of pointed out something I maybe hadn't thought of straightforward is the series is just me in my retirement getting ready to check out someday, probably soon or, at any point, and just trying to pass the baton on. So, yeah, thank you. That was wonderful.
I like the part where it talked about, because you're a man who honored our country for so long, and you understand what it is to stand at your post until the work is done. And I don't think that's something that the young people and people don't always grab. That, we don't know that there's people who've stood at posts, isn't there a person from the military guarding some monument in DC at all hours?
Yeah, it's the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which we give a tribute to on every Memorial Day, like they just did there. And yeah, they're guarding that post 24/7, 365, just as a tribute to those soldiers, both that we know of, as well as the soldiers that we don't know of that are lying there that gave all.
So, I don't think people have really grasped what people give up in our country. I'm a teacher, and I don't think people grasp what a teacher does. Every day, they think it's an expensive babysitter, but there's so much more. I
do. My wife taught for many, many, many years, so all different levels. So I get it.
Now, what I do in my day job is I'm a high school teacher, so of math and computers. So,
Nice.
And I don't think people know. It's a little thing, but when you go out and there's a military discount and a police discount, there's no teacher discounts. Why aren't there teacher discounts? You think
there should be teacher discounts?
I think so. Of course, you're a hero for what you did, but I think the teachers in our countries are heroes every day, and they're doing something for our kids, and so we need to describe them as heroes too. Being a little bit self-serving, because I am one, I know, but there's lots of amazing teachers who are there at 6 a.m. and leave at 8 p.m. and they're there for the kids, and they.
But you just have the whole summer off, right? You don't have to do anything.
Yeah,
he says, joking.
It's summer. Oh yeah. Well, you're retired, so what are you talking about? Well, I do have the summer off, and I'm in my summer vacation right now. And the great benefit of being a teacher is the time off, because my two sons, the time I could spend with them when other dads couldn't. I'm off right now. I've been off already. What is it? What's the date today? In real, in IRL, the 10th. I've been already off like 2 weeks. So. And
I just have to clarify now, because people might not have understood that I was being sarcastic, because, my wife, she'd be taking classes to try to better what she's teaching. She'd be doing lesson plans, all of these things that people don't think about. And then, yes, trying to catch up with their families and their children is all critically important too, because you don't have that time during the year. So, yes, I do appreciate what you do.
So how'd you know if I don't, how'd you know, maybe I'll edit out that last part so you'll be in trouble with your wife. Look at him complaining about teachers. I'll take out. No, I don't.
I'm already enough trouble with my wife. You don't need to help me. Thank you.
I don't edit. The only thing I edit is the intro and the outro, and everything else is exactly as recorded. All the mistake. I'll probably take out the little bit of technical issues we had at the start, But
Yeah.
everything we say, there's no editing, and unless I have sometimes guests, they write me back and say, "Oh, I talked about this. Can you take that sentence out?" And of course, I'll do that. But okay, back to your books. The capstone, the Tesseract Vortex is on its way, right? That's what we're waiting for. And you've said the series is not finished. So what's next?
Yeah. So, per every other, trilogy that I finished, it was about 2 days after I sent it in. I was like, wait a minute, and so that's why, Doyle, I don't really feel like I'm writing this. I feel like I'm reporting it. And so just in line with the rest of all of the 316s and the Tophets and the Ketuvim's, which we didn't talk about, and the birth of my granddad, all of those things, it's not been work. It sounds kind of crazy. I'm starting, in my 63-year-old age here, starting to go, okay, wait, and trying to think of a character and where are they right now and where did I leave them, 7 books back. Because I have people, that I wrote 2 sentences on in the 3rd book that have like 8 chapters on them in the 7th book and that kind of thing. So there's time tunnels, there's people moving around. So there's a lot to keep track of. But having said that, this has not been work for me. It has been, wonderful. And again, I'm reporting on it. I'm not working at trying to figure it out. These things are just coming to me all the time. So yeah, this next, the one that's coming out soon, gets into that second granddaughter thing. And all of these little surprises where I'm like, oh, wait, I have to write more. They have just really increased the scope and the depth and all of what's going on in these books. So it makes every one of them bigger. And I go back to, The Faithful, which was the very first book, or Origin, which is like the 7th book. And all of a sudden I'm looking at it, and these stones, these, fruit of the spirit, which are big in this, is in the book that I'm releasing shortly, or that'll be out on the 21st. They were big. They were big already, and I just didn't even remember. So it's all fitting together perfectly like a puzzle. And it's just not done yet because there's more pieces of that puzzle for that picture. So in a way, it's kind of a negative because you can't get the full picture of the puzzle and just really understand how what I would say is incredible. The whole, not to pat myself on the back because, like I said, I'm reporting it, not writing it. Just how big of a picture and how awesome of a story it is until you get deep into it. Not to say that, the first trilogy by itself isn't good, but it blows up and it becomes so much bigger as the trilogies go on. So in a way, it's kind of a curse because how many people are actually going to work their way through to 11 without trusting me that, that it's worthwhile doing it. But the Tesseract Vortex, just a little hint. Basically, there is a thing that an agent can go into, and basically all time throughout this whole story series is present. So whether it's in the past or whether it's in the future, it's present for them where they are. So it can be affected. And then, of course, the other side gets in there too. So then it starts, both sides are tampering with the past, and no grandfather complexes, but they're tampering with the past and things are changing, and that fight is becoming a time kind of fight too. So it blew up everything once again. But then you find out people from the very first book are coming into this time to do things. And you're like, I thought they were long past and dead. Now I find out they were really important. And now I get them a lot more from the first book. So I ramble on because I'm trying to explain the unexplainable over 5,000 pages. So
I think
everybody takes.
So you said grandfather complex. I think you meant grandfather paradox.
What I meant.
And for those who are listening, a grandfather paradox is, if I go back and kill my grandfather, how can I exist? Right? That's the concept of a grandfather. I believe that's what it is. That's what you understand. Yeah. Right. So, or if somebody goes back and kills my grandfather, there's another type of grandfather paradox is if I go back in time and meet my grandmother or my great grandmother and produce my grandfather from it. So then where did we come from? Because the person, so that's another type of grandfather.
And there was a big one in Terminator that I don't know, people may or may not remember, but I'm not going to go into it all. But people still love Terminator, and it was still a #1 movie, even though there was a big time grandfather paradox there. But
yeah, well, there was. The fact that they kept going back and they could go back to any time, it seemed like if they can infinitely go back to different times, there was. It's sci-fi and it's silly. There's lots of stories you have to suspend belief for. Harry Potter,
This one, not this one. That's my big claim to fame, I think. And I'm still waiting for someone to tell me I screwed up. But I don't have any problems. And if I did find a problem, I fixed it in a later book. And that's kind of the key to having a long series.
Okay. So when will you know you're done?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I have this next one that I have all planned out and I've started writing, and then I can see where there'd be one more. So potentially there's two more, what would end up being trilogies, would probably put it at 6,000 or 7,000 pages, kind of thing. But again, I have to tell you, Doyle, each book is semi-independent. Each trilogy is pretty independent. So it's kind of like that Russian doll thing, where one doll fits within a bigger one and a bigger and a bigger. The other dolls are important, and it makes a cool thing to have multiple dolls inside one big doll. But each individual doll by itself, each individual trilogy will probably satisfy most people, but maybe get you to go, wait a minute, oh, there's more, and then want to find the other ones. So,
wow. So let's talk about where people can get your books. Like, say, where can people find them? This series, where can they talk to you and follow you? And so let's get all the info.
Yeah. So and I don't know, is this going to be just audio? Or is there going to be a platform that's...
We just do audio, yeah.
Okay, great. So I'll spell out my name real quick then. Terrence, all E's for Terrence and 2 R's, and then Rotering, Rotering. So if you put that in Google or any search engine, it'll come up with where the books are, how much they are, where you can buy them, as well as podcasts, and anything else you want to know about me kind of thing. Or you can go to Chronicles of Trinith, that's that first trilogy, Trinian, Trinian, chroniclesoftrinith.com, and you can find all that information again, as well as an email that you can send me questions and I'll answer them. And so, yeah, between those two, I think you can find me anywhere and find the books anywhere. And the books are out there everywhere. And I also want to make a plug for Kindle on Amazon. If anybody's got that, I almost said her name and then she would have started talking and you'd have to bleep that out. That device. So they're not in audio books yet, other than Kindle, but Kindle will speak them pretty well, and they have multiple voices now. But you can also get other apps very cheaply that have like thousands of voices, and they'll read anything that you've got also. So that might be even better than the audio books through Audible or whatever. So I would say go to, if you don't already have Amazon, you can use the Kindle, and it can read to you, and you can get that app, and you can listen to them while you're driving and such too. Wow. And they're way cheaper. You can get a whole trilogy for under $10 as opposed to buying the books.
That's great. Well, so people if people are discovering you today on the show, they've got a few books to go back to and read from the beginning. So we're going to be, so I always like to give my guests when we get close to the close. So before we close, is there anything I did not ask you that you wanted to say, or is there any message you'd like to give to the listeners who are listening and trying to find some connection, listening to these podcasts?
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to bring up is, there's a puzzle maker making a big puzzle, and all of us are a piece of that puzzle. We go through our lives, we're shaped through all of the things, the adversity we go through, all of the times that we go through, and they shape us to be that piece of the puzzle that'll fit in that grand overall picture. And I just wanted to encourage, especially young people that might be listening, is don't try too much to be some other piece of the puzzle. Be your own piece of the puzzle and figure out how you'll fit in that big picture. We don't need more than one piece of any individual piece of a puzzle. We don't need two, quarterbacks of the football teams or the head of the cheerleading squad, if you will. We need you, and we need your piece to fit in that piece of the puzzle. So I would just like to encourage people to do that. And then the last thing, Doyle, is, every morning, I've done this for quite some time and it works pretty well. And another thing I want to encourage people to do is when you wake up in the morning, just smile and then think of what the different letters of smile mean. The S for service, the M for mission, the I for intentionality, the L for legacy, and the E for eternity. And a very quick description is, who am I serving today? What is my mission? What are just a couple things that I should do that kind of fit into that? That's the intentionality, the actions. And that will build a legacy for you day after day after day, just like, 7 pages of a story every day. And all of a sudden you've got this humongous series. And that builds a legacy, and that'll hopefully lead into where you want to go on your deathbed. And you can look back on a life well lived. So just wake up and smile and know that you're important and that God loves you and that you're a piece of that puzzle, and never forget that, because you are important and you have purpose. So thank you for the opportunity to say that.
Thank you. I know I told you that was going to be the closing comment, but I'm really fascinated by this smile thing. So you talk of the 5 service, mission, intentionality, legacy, and eternity. Which one do you think is the hardest for people to learn?
Let's see. So that's a really good question I hadn't thought of too much. Legacy will come by itself. Eternity will also come, based on all the things we talked about, a much longer podcast. Who you're serving, what your mission is, probably the intentionality. What am I supposed to do today? And I think if, the other things just lead you into, give me a couple things to do today. And when I go to bed tonight, if I've accomplished them, then I'll feel pretty good about it.
Okay.
So if those things are directed toward what you think is important, that service and the mission, then I think you'll lead a life that you look back on and be pretty happy with.
So if someone is listening and they say, this speaks to me, and where do they begin tomorrow? Is it just to wake up and smile? Where do they begin?
I think that is what it'll be. So if they wake up, and I found that in the morning, I don't know about you, but I find in the morning, my mind is just cranking. It's jumping around all over the place. I think they'll, you could think about beforehand, service and mission, what does that mean? I'm not in the military, But I mean, whether you're serving your family, you're serving your spouse, you're serving your brother and sister, you're serving in that, whatever, just give back a little bit, invest a little bit, and look at how you can do that. And I guarantee you, if you do that, if you invest in your time, which is probably your most precious asset that you'll ever have, and you usually don't realize that till you get to my age. Mm-hmm. But if you invest a little bit of your time in other people, and that kind of shows you what that service or mission is, you'll figure out things you can do. And by doing those things, even if it's just feeling good about yourself, you'll realize that you're not wasting your time here. You're actually doing something that has purpose. And I think as long as you're doing something that has purpose, you'll be happy, and you'll feel fulfilled by it.
I think I've spoken to a lot of service people and a lot of police officers and stuff, and sometimes there's a sadness behind them, but you have a light. You have an obvious light, and you don't seem to live in that anxiety and pressure that a lot of people who serve in those positions tend to live in. And so it's a pleasure to hear that and see that. I'm always concerned that I'm going to get that, that sadness that seems to come with some people who serve in that way.
Well, I get sad too, but thank you, Doyle.
But thank you for your light. So I know I said you were going to have the last word, so I'll let you have the last word, but thank you so much for coming on. And thank you for what you do. We'll send people to your stories, and you can close us out with whatever you like.
Great. Well, I just want to thank you guys again. That was a wonderful tribute, if you will. I don't think I deserve a tribute, but I do really appreciate you looking at the work and looking at who I am and seeing me. And I think that was just wonderful. That's a wonderful piece of your podcast that you guys do. And I'm lost for words.
Okay.
Beyond that, so just thanks.
Thank you so much. So to Terrence, I wanted to have a bit of silent recording just because there was a little bit of interference, and if I can get a 5 seconds snippet of it, I can take it out so it can be quiet for 5 seconds. Okay. Okay, so there's 5 seconds. So I can.
It's hard to shut me up for 5 seconds. I do like to talk.
Yeah, I've noticed you got a little. Here's Howie, by the way. He does exist.
Hi, Howie. Hey. Good to see you.
We're actually we're in an actual radio station. It's not like we're not like So we're actually in a radio station in Sacramento. Okay. Hey, thank you so much. This was fun, and I'll be in touch with you with the next steps. And you said you have a book that's coming out on the 25th, and so of June.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
June? Okay. I don't know. I'll have to look at the schedule to see how close we can get it out to around that time. If I put you in my regular schedule right now, it probably wouldn't be out till November because that's how many episodes I have in the can. But for episodes that have a timing issue like that, I usually can slip them in early to get coincide. And I will write the description and stuff, and I'll send it to you for if you want to add links and stuff in there, whatever you want to have. So I'll stay in touch. But thank you so much.
That. Thank you so much. I love your podcast, and there's more to talk about if you ever have a whole. And it doesn't sound like you do, but if something were to happen, and all of a sudden you got 4 shows you're recording every week, or 5 or 6, feel free, just drop me a line. There's so much more to talk about.
Oh yeah, I'd love to have you back on, and we definitely. I make time for the important conversations, and not that everybody's not important, but stuff that touch me a little bit more. And so I definitely have, because I got people now booked in November. And what happens is when I get there, they've forgotten that they booked and now they're not available. So I frequently have spots. I'm ruthless. Like if I text you and I don't get a confirmation, then I'm presuming you've lost interest. So I'm not going to spend a week chasing somebody around. So sure. I frequently get spots open up. But hey, thank you. And good luck on the book release that's coming.
Thank you so much. And I'll throw in a wonderful comment. If you don't mind doing a quick review on podcast or Podmatch, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I will throw that up here. And I'll also send you a copy of the tribute story tomorrow. So.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you guys again. Appreciate it. God bless.
God bless.
Okay. Before we close tonight, I want to leave a little room for what happened here. Not to explain it, not to debate it, just feel it. Because sometimes a conversation reaches beyond the person speaking. It finds an unfinished place inside us, a question we've been carrying, a purpose we have misplaced, or part of ourselves we've been quietly trying to understand. Terrence Rotering spent nearly 4 decades serving his country. He learned what it means to accept mission, to remain vigilant, and to stand at a post until the work is done. And when that chapter of his life ended, he discovered something that many of us eventually have to learn. Service does not always end when the uniform comes off. Sometimes the mission simply changes. The aircraft became dragons. The command centers became distant worlds. The threats on the radar became the unseen battles taking place inside the human heart. And the man who had spent his life watching the horizon began writing stories that asked the rest of us to look inward. Thousands of pages, 11 books and counting. A trilogy of trilogies, new worlds, new dimensions, and stories that continue to grow far beyond what he first imagined when he sat down to write something for his sons. But beneath all the worlds, all of those battles, all those stones, heroes, villains, and mysteries, there's one quiet message. You matter. You have a place here. You are equipped. Tonight, Terrence described life as a puzzle created by a puzzle maker, and each of us has a piece shaped by everything we have endured. The losses, the victories, the disappointments, the strange turns we never expected, the things we would never have chosen, but somehow became part of our shape. Maybe you can spend a long time looking at your own shape and wondering what's wrong with it. Maybe you wished you were more like somebody else, more successful, more certain, more faithful, more talented, less wounded, less complicated. But a puzzle does not need 2 copies of the same piece. It needs the piece only you can be. Your life may not make complete sense while you're holding it by yourself. A single piece puzzle rarely reveals the whole picture. It may appear uneven or strangely shaped. Its colors may even seem disconnected from everything surrounding it. But that does not mean it's made incorrectly. It may simply mean that you have not yet seen where it belongs. Perhaps that is what fate is. Not having the entire picture, but trusting that your piece will still have a place within it. And whether you call your faith God, purpose, love, intelligence, and design, human connection, or simply the mystery that keeps us drawing us together towards one another, there are moments when the noise quietens and we feel something underneath it all. A stir, a pull, a small recognition that says, pay attention, this may be meant for you. So listeners, I'm asking you not to rush away from that feeling. Sit with it for a moment, please. Where did tonight's conversation touch you? Was it the idea of discovering another mission after one chapter of life has ended? Was it Terrence's discipline, writing page after page without knowing how large the story was eventually going to become? Was it his belief that there's order beneath that sometimes looks like chaos? Was it the reminder that your time is precious? Or simply was it the thought that you are important, you are loved, and there may be work in this work that only you can do? Terrence offered us the word smile. Service, mission, intentionality, legacy, eternity. 5 words you can carry into the morning. Who can you serve? What is your mission today? What intentional action can you take before the day is over? What legacy are those actions quietly creating? And when you look beyond the urgency of today, what do you believe all of this is leaning towards? You do not need to solve your entire life tomorrow morning. You do not need to write 5,000 pages. You do not need a perfect plan. You only need one intentional act. Call a person whose name has been sitting in your mind. Forgive someone. Even if forgiveness begins privately within you, tell someone you're proud of them. Thank the teacher, the veteran, the parent, the friend, or a stranger whose services changed something in your life. Begin at the first page. Take the walk. Speak the truth. Ask for help. Offer help. And if this conversation moved you, if something in Terrence's words, his faith, his books, or the tribute we shared reached you, do not keep that feeling locked inside. Reach out. Reach out to Terrence and tell him what you heard. Explore the worlds he's created. Lean more into his books. Find ways to connect with him at chroniclesoftrinith.com. That is Chronicles, CHRONICLESOFTRINIAN.com. And reach out to us. Tell us what stirred you. Most importantly, reach out to somebody in your own life and begin the conversation you have been postponing. Because stories are not meant to remain trapped inside one person. Stories move. They travel from voice to ear, from heart to heart, and sometimes across generations. A father writes a story for his young sons. Years pass, the sons grow up. The small story becomes a trilogy. The trilogy becomes an entire universe. And somewhere, someone listening late at night hears exactly the words they needed. You are not powerless. You are not forgotten. You are not an unnecessary piece. You are still being shaped. Your mission might not be over. Perhaps it's not fully begin. Terrence, thank you for your years of service. Thank you for standing your post. Thank you for carrying that discipline into your writing. Thank you for building worlds that remind people to look more carefully at this one. And thank you for reminding us that strength is not always loud. Sometimes strength is simply waking up, smiling, choosing a purpose, and taking one more step towards it. To everyone listening, be gentle with the unfinished parts of yourself. Trust that chapters which confuse you may sometime become essential to the story. Remember that what appears broken may simply be taking its final shape. And never underestimate what can begin with one person, one idea, one act of service, or one page. This is Spirit Talk Show, bedtime stories for grown-ups. Sleep well, wake with purpose, find the place where your peace belongs. Now go make a story worth telling. Good night.